Let's chat a bit more about this now. Siya Sithole is a programs manager at the Association for Rural Advancement. A very good evening to you, sir. Thanks indeed for your time. So some would say, I guess, strained relations between farm owners and farm workers. For example, on the same land, for example, where you have one that has access to basic services and the other does not, have you found that the height of inequality is sometimes what causes what we're seeing in those particular areas?
Good evening, Griselda, and good evening to the viewers at home. Your question has hit it on the nail. It is definitely the strained relations that are causing these issues that are persisting on farms. And as you put it, is that it's two parties who have to coexist on the same land. Farm occupiers, farm workers, labor tenants are living on land that they do not own. Farmers, landowners, are also living on the same land as owners or as business people on that land with farming enterprises. Now, these two groups have to coexist, but the starking contrast in their enjoyment of their constitutional rights, it continues to cause friction between them. As you have put it, you can imagine that a farmer would enjoy all the basic services on the farm, which they would pay for. On the same farm, the families or the community that lives on that farm, in the main, would not enjoy things like electricity, would not enjoy. And it's this inequality that causes this friction, that you have this group that is living in poverty, that does not have a relationship with the farmer. They do not understand each other. Farmers have a poor understanding of communities that are living on farms. Communities themselves have a poor understanding of farmers. So there's a lot of assumptions that are made between the two. You see a farmer, there are assumptions that the farmer is rich. The farmer looks at the poor community, there's assumptions that are made on that side as well. Yeah. So that is what is causing these persisting issues on farm.
Mr. Sithole, there seems to be a persistent, or this seems to be a persistent issue in parts of KwaZulu-Natal, Piet Retief and Mpumalanga, where this incident took place. These are just some of the hotspots. How have you been able to deal with such incidents or assist in resolving them?
Yeah, we have definitely for years now have been working in those areas, particularly the Amatuba area, Newcastle, Vryheid, Dumbe, Paul Petersburg area, Piet Retief, part of Mpumalanga, as you say. We've been working in those areas for a number of years. And recently, we've had an opportunity to present or make representations to the KZN Portfolio Committee on Agriculture and Land Reform. We've also had an opportunity to present to the South African Human Rights Commission, where we have put recommendations on the table in that there is a multi-stakeholder approach that is needed to deal with these issues. We cannot expect the courts to solve these issues. There are underlying historical problems that are causing this. We know where this country comes from. We know the history we know how some land was acquired. We know how even today, some people are invading land. All of those things have happened against the prescripts of the law. And the legislation that was put in place in the early 90s, like your Extension of Security of Tenure Act, like your Labor Tenants Act, even the Constitution itself, sought to reverse the injustices of the past by providing a platform where there can be land reform or land and agrarian reform. And so we've put recommendations on the table for Parliament and for the Human Rights Commission to take forward in trying to bring these parties together to find solutions. The solutions won't be found by government. The solutions won't be found by any party on their own. So our recommendation is that you need to create a platform, you need to create a space where all these parties can come together and we can find a way forward. And the key to that is an effective land and agrarian reform program.
But what exactly are the rights of these farm dwellers? These are people who would cultivate the land, make sure that it's profitable, and then not much is being said about what the rights of these farm dwellers are. They're in employment there, but not much is being said about what their rights are of living on that particular land. Are you able to walk us through that?
Definitely. And I think that's a very important question, because we often assume that when we're talking about people that are living on farms, we're talking about just farm workers.
Yeah.
I think the Western Cape is a classic example where most people on farms would be farm workers. In KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga, that's very much different. There are a lot of people living on farms who are indigenous to the land or who have been there for generations upon generations on that land. Some people even claim that farms were built upon them. There is some evidence where there's aerial photographs that show traditional huts that existed on farms years ago. So you'd find that some people have categorized legally as labor tenants. Those are people that are descendants of people who worked the land without receiving any much remuneration. They were given rights. So historically, people were given land to cultivate in return for their labor to assist the farming enterprise. And today we find descendants of those people remaining on those farms. So they have a connection to the land. It is home, which if you actually do a site visit on the majority of farms in KwaZulu-Natal, you'd find that there are grave sites that link people to the land. And on the other side, for some farm owners have been there for generations as well, where their grandparents bought the land or acquired the land generations ago.
Sure.
So you find that both parties have these rights. But it is important to note that because we have the Labor Relations Act, farm workers are protected on farms. Because we have the Extension of Security of Tenure Act, occupiers, people living on land that they do not own, are given statutory rights as well. Because we have the Labor Tenant Land Reform Act, I think it's Act 3 of 1996, where people that are labor tenants are also given rights. And one of those rights that they were afforded was for them to lodge claims for the acquisition of land. So there's over 20,000 claims across the country, the majority of them being in KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga, that were lodged in order to give these people ownership of the land. So that is also what is causing some tension, because people remain on the land, expecting the land to be transferred to them, but because of the slow pace or the ineffective land reform program, they remain waiting. And at the same time, farm owners have to do business on land where there's a lot of uncertainty, where because these claims are not being processed effectively, they remain uncertain in terms of what will happen to the land. So it's all those things. But your question is an important one. People have statutory rights. There are laws that protect people on farms. They cannot just be evicted. They cannot just be victimized. There are laws. The South African Human Rights Commission, we're currently working with the Durban office and the commissioner, the national commissioner as well, Mr. Sibanyoni. We are working on that in terms of the human rights violations that people on farms are facing.
All right. Mr. Sithole, I would have loved to speak to you about how you want the judiciary to deal with this and the power dynamics within these particular situations. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thanks indeed for joining us. Siya Sithole, Programs Manager, Association for Rural Advancement. Thanks indeed for joining us on the program.